Ramon Dela Cruz stood at the center of the Ireland's Got Talent stage like a small, fragile shadow swallowed by the massive lights above him. The stage was a world completely different from the narrow wooden room he slept in back in Davao City, where rain dripped through the roof and roosters crowed before sunrise. His clothes tonight were simple and slightly oversized, the type of outfit donated from a church charity box, and his shoes had thin soles that had already lived through too many miles. Yet Ramon held the microphone with a bravery that did not match his trembling hands. The audience stared, curious and unsure, whispering about the shy boy who looked like he didn't belong on a world-class stage. Behind the judges' panel, Simon Cowell leaned forward with a sharp, analytical gaze, trying to read this poor Filipino teenager who seemed both terrified and full of something mysterious at the same time. Amanda's face softened as she sensed the deep nervousness in him, while Louis adjusted his glasses, expecting nothing more than another shy contestant who might crumble under pressure. The music started softly, a gentle guitar melody echoing through the auditorium, and for a moment Ramon froze as every light seemed to point directly at him. Then, with an exhale that carried the weight of years of hardship, he began to sing. His first note floated across the room, deep, rich, and filled with a soulful vibration that made several audience members gasp. It wasn't just similar to Elvis, it carried the haunting sadness of a life built on survival, the hunger of a dreamer who worked since childhood to help his mother sell fish in Davo's wet market, the exhaustion of long nights where he practiced secretly behind their small wooden house because he didn't want neighbors to laugh at him. Every sound that left his mouth traveled like a story carved from struggle, from poverty, from a life many people in the audience could barely imagine. Simon's eyebrows shot upward instantly. He had heard thousands of singers, thousands of impressions, thousands of covers, but nothing matched the emotional fire burning inside this boy's voice. Amanda covered her mouth, not from shock alone but because she felt the raw pain hidden inside his tone. Louis's eyes widened, and he leaned forward unconsciously, as if he were being magnetically pulled toward Ramon's sound. The audience became unusually silent, mesmerized by the transformation happening before them. The shy, poor teenage boy was suddenly standing tall, channeling the spirit of Elvis Presley with a vocal purity that didn't seem possible for someone his age, much less someone who grew up with so little. Ramon's eyes remained closed as he sang, because he knew if he opened them, he might break. He was singing not just for the judges, not for the show, but for the years he had carried bags of ice to earn coins, for the days he skipped meals so his siblings could eat, for the moments he doubted that someone like him would ever be seen by the world. His voice trembled beautifully on every high note, echoing the exact timbre of Elvis but with an added weight, his own life story hidden beneath every breath. The audience began to rise slowly, like waves lifting in perfect harmony. One woman in the front row wiped away tears, overwhelmed by the sincerity of the performance. Simon leaned back, stunned, whispering something under his breath. Amanda blinked rapidly, her eyes already shining. Louis slapped the desk lightly, a rare sign that he felt the power of what he was hearing. Ramon hit the chorus with a strength that shook the entire auditorium, and in that moment, he wasn't just a poor boy from Davao. He was a phenomenon unfolding live on stage, an unexpected miracle that Ireland's Got Talent had never seen before. The moment Ramon launched into the famous Elvis high note, something electric burst across the Ireland's Got Talent studio, as if the entire room was struck by the same shock of realization at the exact same second. Louis was the first to react visibly, his jaw dropped open before he slammed both hands on the judge's table with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. His chair pushed back slightly from the force, and the audience reacted instantly to his energy, their cheers rising like a wave ready to crash. Louis pointed toward Ramon with a trembling finger, shouting, "This is pure talent. This boy is something else." His voice cracked with the kind of amazement that only true, once-in-a-lifetime raw talent could pull from a judge who'd seen everything. Amanda's reaction was entirely different but just as powerful. Her eyes glistened, and she clasped her hands tightly against her chest, overwhelmed. Her breathing changed, small, shaky inhales as she tried to hold herself together. But Ramon's voice was too emotional, too filled with the hunger and pain of his life, and her resistance began to crumble. The tears that had been threatening finally slipped free, running down her cheeks as she whispered, "He sings like someone who's lived 1,000 lives." Her voice carried across the microphone, trembling but genuine. Amanda had listened to many amazing singers throughout her career, but she had rarely felt a connection this deep, this pure, this full of struggle and soul. And then there was Simon Cowell. He had begun the performance leaning forward, his sharp eyes scanning every expression, every movement, every note that left Ramon's mouth. But now his expression had shifted completely. Simon wasn't just surprised, he was captivated, pulled into the emotional gravity of Ramon's voice. His eyebrows furrowed slightly, not in confusion but in the stunned recognition of something extraordinary. Slowly, almost deliberately, he pushed his chair back and stood. The audience burst into louder cheers at the sight of Simon rising to his feet, because everyone knew Simon didn't stand easily, not unless something truly unbelievable was happening. Ramon remained lost in his performance, unaware of the storm happening around him. His voice soared with the same depth and fire Elvis once carried, but with the emotional ache of poverty carved into every note. It was the voice of someone who had known hunger, who had survived days with little food, who had walked barefoot on hot pavement because buying new shoes was a luxury. It was the voice of a dreamer who had never been given a stage until today. As Ramon reached the last part of the song, his tone broke slightly, not from weakness but from emotion, and that small crack sent Amanda into deeper tears. Simon stepped forward, eyes fixed on Ramon, and when the final note echoed off the studio walls, he shouted with a clarity that cut through the roaring audience, "This is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable." His voice boomed with shock, admiration, and something almost protective. The crowd erupted, people stood, waved their hands, shouted Ramon's name, and cheered with an emotion that felt communal, like everyone recognized they had just witnessed something unforgettable. Ramon finally opened his eyes, breathing hard, staring at the judges who now stood for him. He looked confused at first, unsure if he deserved such a strong reaction, unsure if his dream was real. His chin trembled, and he clutched the microphone with both hands as if afraid anything could disappear at any second. The bright stage lights reflected off Amanda's tear-streaked face as she applauded him with genuine warmth. Louis kept shaking his head in disbelief, still pointing at Ramon like he couldn't get over what he had just witnessed. Simon remained standing and didn't look away for a moment, his expression telling the entire world that Ramon had just delivered one of the most shocking and emotional performances in the show's history. The applause that erupted through the Ireland's Got Talent auditorium felt like a tidal wave crashing against the walls, rolling through the air with thunderous force. Ramon stood frozen at the center of the stage, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what was happening around him. The golden lights above him shimmered, catching in the tears that had already gathered in his eyes. It didn't feel real. Just minutes ago, he was a poor boy from Davao City, standing in second-hand clothes and hoping, praying, that his voice would be enough. Now the audience was chanting his name, their voices blending into a powerful echo that made his chest tighten. He clutched the microphone like a lifeline, feeling its cool metal against his shaking hands as the room continued to roar in approval. Amanda rose from her chair slowly at first, then fully stood with tears streaming down her cheeks. She didn't bother wiping them, she let them fall freely, reflecting the emotion Ramon had pulled from her heart with every note he sang. She pressed one hand to her chest as if trying to calm her racing heartbeat, her face filled with the kind of pride normally reserved for someone she'd known for years. For her, it wasn't just the voice she heard, it was the story behind it, the struggle, the poverty, the courage it took for a fragile boy to stand on the biggest stage of his life and pour out every hidden emotion like a confession to the world. Louis stood as well, clapping above his head in big, dramatic motions, unable to contain his excitement. His mouth hung open between claps as he shook his head over and over, as if trying to convince himself that the performance he had just heard truly happened. Incredible. Absolutely incredible, he shouted between breaths, his voice nearly drowning in the ocean of cheers surrounding the stage. He had seen prodigies, he had seen stars, but something about Ramon reached deeper, because his talent came wrapped in sincerity and hardship, not polish or privilege. Then there was Simon. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down as Simon rose from his seat with a softened expression that very few contestants had ever seen. His usual stern, evaluating gaze had melted into something almost gentle. He stepped forward, resting his hands on the edge of the judging table, his eyes locked on Ramon with an intensity that shook the room. The audience sensed what was coming and their cheering softened into an anticipatory hush. Simon's voice cut through the quiet, steady and warm as he spoke directly to the trembling boy on stage. "Ramon," he said, with a rare softness that carried across the entire hall, "I don't think even Elvis himself would believe what I just heard. You have a gift, something truly rare." Ramon's lips quivered as he tried to process the words. His breath hitched, and he brought a hand to his face, overwhelmed by the sudden rush of emotion. He had never heard anyone speak about him with such respect. In Davao, he was simply the boy who helped his mother sell fish, the boy who practiced singing behind their small wooden house to avoid being teased. Now Simon Cowell himself was praising him in front of thousands. Simon's hand hovered over the golden buzzer, and the world seemed to stop entirely. The audience leaned forward, holding their breath. Amanda covered her mouth again. Louis's eyes grew wide, waiting for the moment. And then Simon pressed it. The golden buzzer lit up instantly, releasing a storm of shimmering gold confetti that rained down from above like a sky blessing Ramon's dreams. The glittering pieces stuck to his hair, his eyelashes, his trembling shoulders. Ramon dropped to his knees, overcome with emotion, his tears spilling freely as he felt the weight of his entire life lifting from him. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't just a poor boy from Davao. In that moment, he was a star, a miracle, and every person in that room knew they had just witnessed a life transform right before their eyes.